So today we're going to talk about grief. I know we talk about grief here a lot, don't we? And it's because grief is one of the biggest emotions that parents feel when they learn that their children are transgender. And the reason I want to talk about it today is because there's a lot of guilt and shame that comes with grief and the feeling of grief when you learn that your child is transgender. And so we've talked before about how grief is a normal reaction to something ending. And when your child comes out as transgender, it's an ending. It's an ending of the idea that you've held about who your child is and your idea about who your child is going to be and what their life might look like, and what your family configuration is and how that looks like. And now you have to adjust to a new way of thinking about your child and their gender, new name for them and new pronouns. And we've talked about this before, and if you want, you can scroll down in my feed and find videos about it. And I have articles about it on my website, so I won't get into that too much. But what I want to talk about today is the ideas that we carry about that grief. The idea that it's not okay, that what we're feeling about that grief is bad, and that it's shameful, and that we shouldn't be feeling it. And I think that we have those ideas because society has this idea that grief is tied to the ending of a life, right? Somebody dies, and we go through a grieving process, and that's acceptable. Like, that's the normal state of how grief should happen, which is true. And so then when our children come out as transgender and we get flooded with all these emotions and we sit and sort through what those emotions are and then suddenly discover that one of them is grief, we're like, well, wait, what's this? Like, I can't be grieving because my child's still right here in front of me. Like, this doesn't make any sense. Well, it does, actually, because your idea of your child and who they are and who you thought they were going to be has ended, right? So there's that ending that's taking place. And so you have to understand that your grief is not, it's not bad, and it's not wrong, and you're not a bad person, and what you're experiencing and feeling is not wrong. And it's complicated. It's all very complicated, and it's hard and messy to sit with those emotions and to fully experience them and to understand where they're rooted, because oftentimes it's not about your child being transgender. And I have an article about that on my website that you can go read. It's about something else. It's usually about an idea that you've had and held for a long time about your child specifically, but not about the fact that now they're transgender. So, for example, and I've shared this like a million times already, my grief was related to the fact that for a long time, since I was a little girl, I dreamed someday of having a daughter because I grew up with only brothers and I never had a sister. So then when my son came out as transgender, that dream of mine died because now I no longer had a daughter, even though I would come to learn that I never actually did. I just thought I did. So that was very hard for me. And what you will discover for yourself is, what is the thing that is at the root of your grief? Like, what is the hard thing that you're struggling with so much about your child being transgender, that is not actually about them coming out as transgender, because that's just them telling you, this is who I am and I need you to know it about me. And so that was just a side tangent. But anyways, grief is not wrong. And how we think about grief as a society is what needs to change. And another thing that complicates how we feel about the fact that we feel grief is that other people like to have an opinion, whether they ought to or not, and side note, they ought not, about the fact that we're grieving, and they like to tell us about it. And so what it comes down to then is that people will tell us, you shouldn't be grieving, because what is that all about? Your kid is still alive. Sometimes people will tell you that your grief is not justified, or that it makes you transphobic. There's like a whole lot of things that people will tell you about your grief. And here's what I just want to say about that. Unless they are you and they are in your shoes experiencing your feelings about your child coming out as transgender, they don't get to have a say in how you're feeling about any of it. I mean, that's the long and short of it. As long as you're loving and supporting your child, your emotions aren't wrong. And so it's all complicated and it's all messy, and it it takes a long time to be able to sit with your emotions and your pain and to be able to move forward through them. And it's not a quick, easy, overnight type of thing. Like, you're not going to wake up next week and be like, oh great, I sat with my stuff and suddenly I feel better. Unless you've been doing this work for a while, and then you might. But generally it's a process, and it takes a long time, and you have to be willing to do the work. But I just wanted to come on here real quick. I mean, it's like been 8 minutes, it's not real quick, and talk about the fact that how you're feeling about your grief may be something that you need to let go of, because your grief is not wrong. And if that's the message that you're telling yourself, or that you're hearing from other people, then let me be the one to tell you that those people are wrong, and the voice inside of your head is also wrong, and that your grief is okay. It's okay. And it's okay for however long it takes for you to feel it and be able to sit with it until you are ready to move forward from it. Okay. If you want to talk about this more, you can feel free to leave a message in the comments. And if you're not okay with doing that, you can always send me a direct message or an email, and I'm happy to discuss it with you further. And we'll talk more next week.